and welcome to Pica Talk, the podcast of the printing industry of the Carolinas, or Pica. This podcast is brought to you by Pica's platinum sponsors, Athens Paper, Domtar, Prisco, Mac Papers and Packaging, Recycling Management Resources, Linden Meyer Monroe, Manchester Industries, and Case Paper. Today's topic is an important one, and it's why a dirty printing plant can't make money. Leading the conversation today is Sid Chadwick of Chadwick Consulting. Be sure and check out the educational training programs he has for printing professionals. The link is in the description. To start the conversation, Sid, if a printer listening today could make just one change this week that would improve customer impressions, employee satisfaction, and operational performance, what would you recommend?
I thought about that opening question, Terry, and one of my all-time favorites came from Tim Craig's wife, who is also a consultant. And what she said, I don't think I'll ever forget. She said, if you aren't measuring what you're doing and reviewing and analyzing what you're measuring, you're not any better than the next person who's got an opinion.
That's very good.
And I never forgot it. And the longer I went along and watched and implemented measurements in organizations and the impact that measurements had on performance and the individuals, I realized I was looking at a very powerful process. So the very beginning, the very one central theme is that every department and many of the individuals in those departments should be measuring and charting on a wall that is visibly available to anyone who walks by to see what they are doing, the progress they are making. Mm-hmm. What I came to understand, as one person explained to me, is that in this country, we are performance oriented. We cannot tolerate anything staying the same, whether it's racing a car, playing a game of football or basketball, or running a printing operation. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to improve and to find ways to improve. And when we get everyone involved with measuring what they are doing, it will make a difference and it will improve in every corner of the operation. The top person in the organization needs to set that not just as a mission for the organization, but to demonstrate it. We lead by example. And when the top person or the top executive staff share with the organization what they individually are measuring about what they do and what they contribute, it will be picked up and it will be carried through. I really believe that a suggestion box in the middle of a plant makes a very big difference. And one thing that needs to be added there that sometimes gets forgotten is we need to have paper and pen and a suggestion box that has a locking key on it. People can write a suggestion. They need to sign it, of course, and drop it in, and it stays there. And on a monthly basis, this is very important. Senior management is there when that box is opened, and the suggestions are read, they are documented, they are written down and noted, and where it's appropriate in terms of the timeliness of it, at that meeting, when that suggestion box is open and those suggestions are read, if something can be answered right then, it is. But there is, in a prompt manner, those suggestions are written down and responses from senior management. What we're doing is going to the individual opportunities to involve everybody in the organization to become a part of measuring and improving what they are about. And as someone once pointed out to me, if no one except the individual pushing a broom and cleaning up the floor and what's been done from a day of work cleans up better than anybody else, there is a ripple effect that carries through every department. George Washington Carver was one who said, the smallest changes that an individual implements and sustains ends up setting that ripple effect that goes on to improve almost everything else that ripple effect touches. For example, there needs to be a toolbox in a central location. Earlier this week, in order to prepare for today's session, I gave someone I have the highest regard for. His name is Mike Melota. Mike was raised in Iowa. He has spent the last 30 or 40 years in California as a plant manager of a growing, successful company. And I said, Mike, what's the first thing you would mention? And he said, I would have a box of tools, and there would be a list of those tools, and all tools would go in that box, and you couldn't take a tool out without signing for it so that people know who has what. He said, you wouldn't believe how often, how frustrating it is when you go to get a tool to fix something that you can fix right away, and the tool's not there, and you don't know where it is, and nobody else does either. The time that's wasted in those kind of examples are happening on a daily, if not an hourly basis. Little simple things of that nature that are followed through with extreme discipline by everybody, respected by everybody in the company, make a tremendous difference in the increased productivity. Every department should have a performance improvement chart, preferably on a wall, so that anyone walking through that department can look at that chart and instantly see what the primary improvement issue is and how the progress is occurring. I'll never forget, a major customer came to a client of mine in Baltimore, and it was a very important visit. The director of purchasing was coming there to see if this was the right supplier for a long-term agreement. The plant had been cleaned up. Everything was spick and span. And she walked in on that first day, never having met any of the people there, but having been invited by her engineering department to go and visit this company, that they were a very unusual company. And her first words in the meeting room were, I'll bet you've cleaned up everything possible for me to go through and tour your plant. And there was a big smile on everybody. She said, here's what I want you to do. She said, we're going to take that tour, but in every department, I want to see the chart of what the primary improvement initiative is in that department. And I want to see at least 2 years of performance progress occurring. We don't like to bring a supplier in for a short-term basis. We want suppliers that we can look to on a long-term basis and will have the culture and the internal DNA to continuously improve what they bring to us in both cost and initiatives, creativity, and performance. There was a loss of those smiles immediately because they did not have any charts available. But I submit that those charts in every department, both for the department and for the individuals, will make a significant difference in improvement in performance. For example, many times we think we're measuring what is important, but we're measuring the wrong items. As an example would be estimating. In so many companies, they measure how many estimates did we do today? How many estimates did we do last week on this day? How many estimates did we do last week, etc.? The issue is, how many estimates did we win? And how much creativity from the estimator was allowed to be brought forward to initiate and make the estimate and the quotation much more effective. It's the creativity, the initiative, and the improvement of what was initially started in a quote request that helps to lead to a discussion between the salesperson and the estimator, the salesperson and the buyer, and sometimes between the buyer and the quote and the estimator. Not how many quotes did we generate, but how many did we win? Another issue is important is how many deliveries were on time. Tends to be what gets measured. But I would ask how many deliveries were late and what was the reason for them being late. In terms of deliveries being on time, that tends to have a direct relationship to the overtime that was produced and how strong are we as a plant in having cross training so that there are no positions that are not fully manned when somebody is out, which is always going to happen, which helps to ensure that deliveries are on time and that overtime was not required. Pre-press, for example, number of proofs were on time. When did the customer ask for it versus when did they get it? How many errors were in those proofs so that the proofs had to be reproduced, and this time correctly? How many times did a job ticket get written up in which important information was missing and had to be rewritten, or the use of a flag memo because the job was so complicated or different from what had previously been produced that people didn't read the job ticket? The flag memo makes all the difference in the world in people looking at a job ticket very differently, and waste and spoilage not being incurred. Press rooms are a major consumer of materials in a plant. And by the way, if anybody's got questions and wants to interrupt, I invite you to do it. I will never forget going through a plant in California. It was being owned by immigrants from Iran. They were doing a courageous job of learning the printing industry while operating a company that was required about 40 employees. It was my first visit there. I had been invited to come and visit. They had never met me. I had never met them or any of their people. And after visiting for a few minutes in the president's office, both of us feeling a little awkward, he said, "Why don't we take a plant tour?" I said, "That's a great idea." We went through that plant, and I got to tell you, it was one of the dirtiest plants I had ever seen. It had rags all around on the floor, around the presses. There was paper that had looked like it might have been in position on the floors for over a week. We got back to his office. I kept quiet as we walked through the plant. Got back to his office, and he says, "Tell me what you saw and what you think." And I had to hesitate a moment, so I was trying to measure how much of the truth could this man take. And finally, with a sense of respect in my tone of voice, I said, "I think your plant is filthy." There was silence for about 15 seconds between us right there in his office with the door closed. And then in a very calm, modest voice, he said, "My wife says the same thing you just said." It was a moment of truth. I had told him the truth. I had said it respectfully, and we began working on cleaning up that operation from one end to the other. Maintenance schedules in press rooms are critical, and too often the production schedule takes precedence over the maintenance schedule. And then all of a sudden we find out that the maintenance on a very, very important piece of equipment, not just important, but very expensive, has been delayed repeatedly. And now we've got a piece of equipment that needs to be repaired with a fairly expensive piece of repair and expense. Waste and spoilage also tends to go up when repairs and maintenance are delayed. There should always be a chart on the wall showing backup operators for every important process that's going on. And where we don't have backup operators that are trained for when someone is out. Mr. Mike Malota years ago explained to me that he would tell people right up front, if you want extra time, learn to run other pieces of equipment. If you want extra income that doesn't show up as overtime, but fills in for somebody who's out, learn to run those other pieces of equipment. His plant was always filled with backup people, on-time deliveries, and people respected the fact that he gave them the voluntary opportunity to learn extra operations, make themselves more valuable to the company, make themselves more money for their families, and run a better plant. On my list of what needs to be measured, there needs to be an inspection sheet for the bathrooms. I'm going to talk about plant tours in a few minutes, but I will never forget opening up a plant tour survey and the prospect that had gone through the plant that gave us really high marks on almost everything. But then in one of the areas, they had a voluntary opportunity to write comments. They wrote in, it would have been nice if all the supplies for cleaning had not been stored in the ladies' bathroom. That was like a knife to the heart. We don't see what the customer sees. We don't experience what the customer experiences. And so getting feedback, documenting that feedback, and finding ways to make sure that certain errors that have occurred don't continue to occur. One of the lists that needs to go on in terms of running a plant that needs improvement is not just who we've gained as new accounts, but who did we not sell this month and last month and year to date, and sometimes last year plus this year to date that we previously did sell. Too many companies don't measure until it's too late. Who did not buy? Who are we not making contact with? Who are we not calling and checking on them and asking what's changed, what's different, is there anything we can help them with, telling them what's new about our company, and asking them what's new about their operation. Finding out who has not bought needs to occur within 30 days of when we would have expected them to buy, and that involves personal contact. One of the issues that experienced buyers have learned to do is that when they are seriously considering a new supplier, number one, they must go take a plant tour. And number two, in taking that plant tour, they want to drive around to the back of the plant. What does the back of the plant look like? Do we have crates and platform holders stacked up and scattered? Are there open areas of grease? Is it neat and clean and orderly and safe? Would we pass an EPA inspection or would we not? What does our plant and the grounds around the plant look like? What is the first impression that people experience? When those individual prospects come through the front door, is there a signage on that, just on the inside and maybe even on the outside and inside, that says, "Welcome, Ms. Smith. We're delighted to have you with us today"? On that point, there should be, when we have visitors coming into the plant, and particularly those that are going to take a plant tour, there should be information that goes out to every department that people have a chance to read during lunch and during their breaks about who's coming, a little bit about their company, and why they are important to us, and what we might want to tell them about our company that seems to be a good fit in terms of what they might need. I'll always remember having a really major prospect go through a client's location, and our CFO, who was a very bright individual but a bit of an introvert, had made it a point to introduce himself to the visitors that were coming through, but he had done his reading of who was coming, what their company was about, what we might have in terms of a capability that they would be interested in. And the prospect stopped and talked to him for 15 to 20 minutes. The sales rep was wanting to get on with the tour, but the prospect wanted to stand there. He was engaging a discussion. And as he moved on, finally, he asked the sales rep, "Who was that gentleman? Gosh, he was interesting and very bright." And the sales rep, with a tone of voice that also had a bit of surprise, said, "He's our CFO." And the prospect said, "Wow, I would have never guessed that. He knew a lot about us." You don't get a chance for those first impressions very often. Preparation is so critical in so much, and that's really what today's discussion is about. Everything we've talked about here is leading to improved performance and preparation for improved performance that has a chance to occur at some point in the immediate future. And that's what measuring performance, measuring improved productivity, reducing waste and spoilage, and improving what we are about in terms of from one department to the next makes all the difference in the world. Let me just go ahead.
Stan, I have a question. We're talking a lot about clean plants and, the tidiness of plants. How can a clean plant actually contribute to increased sales?
That is a multifaceted question. It's a great question. And you really kind of brought me back to the original theme. First off, I cannot emphasize enough that we lead by example. I said that early on. And when the president or the CFO or the director of sales in going through the plant, hopefully on almost a daily basis and speaking to folks, takes a moment to sweep up some of the clippings that are on the floor, or to move a pallet with permission from that department so that the pallet is completely within the lines of where it is supposed to be and not in a walkway, not in an area that'll be covered or transported by a forklift. People see that. It makes a statement because it deals with both safety, orderliness, and every time, as someone who's one of my long-term friends who lives out in Tucson, Arizona, made the statement to me earlier this week when I called him on this very topic for this afternoon. He said, I try to teach people every time they have to unnecessarily move a pallet of materials in order to get to something else, it's $10. Count how many times a pallet has to be moved in the course of a day, or how many pallets get moved in the course of a day. Does that address your question in any shape or form?
Well, a little bit, but I would like to go back to the concept of if a customer is coming through the plant and on a plant tour, there's a direct correlation, I think, of what if the plant is sloppy and dirty and all this, what does pre-press look like? What does the process in that plant look like? And it can really affect the confidence level of a customer or potential customer regarding their job in that plant.
Well, you're talking about here, we're talking two different dimensions here, at least two. One is, how does it affect the operations of the company? And the second is, what's the impression that you're making for the customer who's going through the plant?
Exactly.
In regards to the operations of the company, if a plant is, everything is shipshape, it's orderly, there is nothing on the floor allowed to accumulate, nobody leaves their working area at the end of their shift without it being straight, clean, and ready for either the next shift or the next day. No exceptions. No exceptions. And if somebody says, I need some help with this area, we've gotten behind on it, but we got all the production done, someone needs to, saying that to the supervisor, either the supervisor gets someone to assist, or he or she personally assist with that process. There's also the issue of the impressions being made for the customer. Right now, we're talking, for instance, about delivery personnel. Delivery personnel are the last ones to see an operation from the company to the customer. And so, in my days as a consultant, I had a 30 to 45-minute program for delivery people. And it covered everything that I could think of or I had ever run into that made all the difference in the impressions that the customer had in terms of who they had as a supplier. There was a checklist, and it included the delivery people quietly observing what other companies were supplying print materials, what other print materials seemed to be falling down and the cartons were falling apart, what other print materials had not been, they just looked like they hadn't been produced to a level of quality that the delivery person's company was producing. And that delivery person also would go and ask the customer, Miss Smith, can we put these cartons in position for you in your warehouse? Is there anything else that we can move for you that doesn't have anything to do with our delivery today? What I learned from that particular company that did it better than anybody else I ever worked with, located in Denver, Colorado, that I learned, I went back after looking at the survey and I said, I have missed something. This delivery person's name is mentioned more in the surveys we got back than the salespeople or the CSRs. And I asked the president, and she said, he grew up in an orphanage. His life is built around structure. He only knows one way to do things, and that's the right way. And there are no exceptions. When the customers have Christmas parties, he gets the invitations, not the sales reps. I'll never forget it. I said, that is great. I made it a point to go and visit with him and talk to him. And he took me through the list of what he goes through when he loads his vehicle to go and make deliveries. And the people in the finishing area, they don't particularly like him because if the packing's not right, the paperwork's not filled out correctly, he will not leave out and take that delivery until it's right to begin with. That's the way examples are set that set ripple effects on impressions for the customers, and the customers notice. Mm-hmm. Delivery personnel are critical, not just in terms of how they handle the goods, the printing that the customer has ordered, but even things like how they drive the vehicle. How dirty is that vehicle? Do they have bottles and empty cans and food wrappers in the floorboard, or is it spotlessly clean? And is there a journal, a spiral ring journal, that he or she, as a delivery person, makes notes in terms of what they observed, what they experienced, what the follow-up needs to be from every delivery before they move the vehicle? I have a client up in Maryland, and he made it a point to once a week go out and talk to his delivery people just in private, closed room discussion. Tell me what you're seeing. Tell me what you're learning. Tell me what we need to improve. They always knew that visit was coming, and they were prepared with their notes. It was priceless. This is where we start setting standards that causes the customer and the people who visit as prospects to walk away with a wow, because they realize they're learning something about what they could take back to their company that goes above and beyond what they would expect from a print supplier. Again, the person at the top sets the example, sets the standard, and follows through. When that opportunity suggestion box is opened up every month, there is also a review of what's being improved. It's not just the suggestions that are in the suggestion box, but it goes through the checklist of which departments have made improvements, what innovations have come about. Even if you've done something that has helped another employee a lot, that employee has the option to do a write-up and put it in that suggestion box that gets acknowledged at that monthly meeting. This is a way of accounting to ourselves, to each other, about what we are here for and what the standards and the cultural values are. When I was a director of sales at a commercial printing company that I had a part ownership in, I had a chart in front of my desk, and it showed the sales for 3 years running on a big 3 foot by 3 foot chart, month by month by month. Every employee in that company, it was my observation, in the course of a month would come by and look at that chart to see, are we growing? Where were we last year this month? Wow, look at that. And that let them go back to their position and say, it feels good to be here. We're going places. It's just month. You can look at it. It's 3 years running. Well, in the course of 3.5 years, we tripled that company's revenues. So, any other questions right now, Terry?
Um,
I'll continue until you
I
have.
I really like to give practical tips to printing companies who are listening to this and watching this. And we're talking a lot about many different things that affect the operations and procedures of operating a printing plant, including keeping it tidy, keeping it clean, etc. But if a company wanted to make noticeable improvements in the next 30 days, where should they start?
I would want to identify what needs to be measured in each department.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to check the records that we have or don't have that go back as far as a year. And I would want a chart on the wall that is visible to anybody who goes through that department that you cannot miss, that shows those performance indices and where they were last year and where we are this year. In the course of the press room, we might be measuring make-ready time and make-ready materials. We also might be measuring spoilage and waste. In the course of the pre-press department, we might be measuring revenue produced versus hours required. Mm-hmm. We might also be measuring errors of proofs and time lost. In the course of the estimating department, I've already mentioned, I want to know how many estimates we won and what were the causes of it. That is an important detail. In a previous Inside Sales Academy class, one of the participants was both an inside salesperson and an estimator, but he had an unusual quality. He liked to look at an estimate and see where there were opportunities for options to improve what the customer had or might choose. And so with regularity that went beyond what a sales rep might request, because a smart estimator will see options that the sales rep might not have. He was developing options that led to discussions between the buyer and the salesperson. Did the buyer take the option? Maybe, maybe not. But when that discussion was initiated because of the option that was there, that either the buyer didn't understand or did understand to the point he or she wanted to know more, that led to that supplier being the primary focus of that buyer for the job that was in question and about to be awarded. Do you follow what evolves when purposeful, smart options are produced for leading to a discussion? It's powerful. And you want the salesperson to be equipped mentally, intellectually, to discuss that option and why it was presented. This opportunity to improve what we're doing, whatever it is we're doing, and to measure it, touches every department. In the course of a plant tour, there is an opportunity for a plant tour survey. I have found incredible opportunities to develop from plant tour surveys being returned as a result of the survey being given to the prospect at the end of the plant tour. What you come to understand is that when you measure what the prospect, the buyer, observed, and they're giving you evaluations on a scale, for example, of 1 to 7, 1 being terrible and 7 being the best, and 5 being sort of, 4 being sort of average, you start to realize that we don't get all 7s anywhere.
Right.
And we're starting to recognize that what we thought, because we've been going by those areas of the company every day, that they see it differently from the way we no longer see what is there. Questions like, was this worth your time? Was there anything meaningful that you experienced and are glad you took the tour? Yes or no? If yes, what seemed most meaningful and you're glad you had a chance to experience it? By the way, on that type of question, if you get a no, you know you have missed the boat and the opportunity to bring forward something that by doing your homework in advance of the tour, you knew what the buyer might be really interested in that you could have prepared for. If you ask the question, is there anybody else in your company that might benefit from a plant tour, and they give you 3 or 4 names, what you then have is the opportunity is to build some in-depth organization to organization relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Simple questions that lead to profound opportunities for follow-up. If you ask the question at the end of the survey, how would you like for us to follow up? I'll never forget, the buyer wrote in, come see me Tuesday morning next week. What do you think they were telling the salesperson? I liked what I saw, and I want to know more, and I'm probably going to have something that makes it worth your time.
Mm-hmm.
A question that is, there are other issues that what you're doing in making a cleaner plant, a more organized plant, a plant that is constantly improving in every dimension, because every employee knows what's being measured and they want to do it better for the benefit of not just their own reputation, but the benefit of their fellow employees and the company in general. A question that is really powerful that can be reported on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis is, what are the number of customers, or what is the percentage of revenues that are in a multi-year agreement? Commercial printing companies tend to not recognize that many buyers would like to save time and have a multi-year agreement with their best suppliers. The best suppliers would like to have a multi-year agreement and have a better job of not only getting more work from really good customers whose work they understand, but work they can do a better job of planning. And when you can plan better for what you're going to be producing, because you've got a multi-year agreement with a given customer, better planning leads to better production and better costs. No other way to look at it. It's what results. And so here you're looking at something as innocent as finding out which customers would have an interest in discussing multi-year agreements. Value added is a subject that most companies either do not understand or do not measure. But one of the most profitable companies I ever had a chance to get to know really well, 25 years ago or so, when the son took over from the dad, he set value added, listen to this, at 70%.
Wow.
And he said, I know we're not there now. And he said, we may not ever get there, but that's our target. That's our objective. And that's what we're going to shoot for. 4 years ago, 21 years after he started as leading to the presidency of the company, they hit 70%. And the last 4 years during the COVID pandemic, they were running at 70% every month. And he said they were outperforming every competitor in their marketplace. It made all, and their director of sales told me personally, he said, Sid, if we hadn't had that 70% target, we would have never been striving for it. And because it was always being emphasized and measured and given back to us, as a sales and estimating and production team. It's a team effort to get to 70%. He said, we were always looking for creative ways to get there, and we were always looking for customers who would pay us a better dollar than someone we already had. Value added compared to previous years. Are you making progress or are you slipping? Joint sales calls should be a part of what a company does. Joint sales calls can be a sales call between the sales rep and the CSR, calling on a prospect or a current customer, or it can be between a sales rep and a key production person whose areas of expertise fit with what the target prospect is unhappy with in terms of their current supplier. I took great, terrific, experienced production people with me when it was the right time and the buyer had revealed to me what areas they were not happy with and thought should be improved, and they had not been able to get it improved with their current supplier. When I would bring that production person with me, we would, on the way to the buyer, have discussed how the conversation I thought would go, that I would make the introduction, I would give that person's credentials, and then I would step aside and be available if I was needed, but I wanted to listen and watch. What happened between the buyer and that production person was pure magic. We would get a trial order from that customer, and I knew not only on that trial order, but all subsequent orders from that customer. That particular production person would be watching over that customer's work going throughout our plant, whether it was in his or her department or not. I didn't have time to look after work that closely. I had other new prospects to bring in, and I knew that when ownership of those new prospects was occurring in personal joint sales calls with production people, something magical had happened. The ownership of that prospect to become a customer had occurred with the production people in the plant. That was pure magic, and I didn't need to worry about it.
Sid, I have we need to wrap this up a little bit, but I have some rapid fire questions for you on this topic.
All right.
So 1 or 2 words, and they're about 6 questions, and it's a fun way to end this.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So first question is, what is the most overlooked area in a print shop?
The communications that go into the job ticket. When and in our education meetings that I facilitated, that I thought I had figured out that the production plant would pretty much give us what we asked for. So the smarter we can make the sales, customer service, and estimating team in terms of not only being able to explain what needed to be done, but more than just specifications. What did the customer want as a final result? And why? How would it be used? When that information is communicated adequately up front, the plant will perform. But too often, pure specifications by themselves are not enough.
Okay, good. Second question is, what is the biggest housekeeping mistake that you see?
Partial boxes, cartons of paper being kept forever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It takes up space. You have to inventory it. It gathers dust. And you've got all kinds of charitable organizations out there wanting to have paper that they can use for communications, and you can build friends. You can produce work for them at discounts. Get it out of the way. What are you spending to measure it, to keep it from falling over, to keep it cleaned up? And you know what? If you went through and threw out anything that is already so dirty and old and crummy, you wouldn't dare run it on a press. You ask, why are we still keeping that? And the answer is so
Absolutely.
obvious. Okay.
Absolutely. And I want to just reiterate that there are a lot of graphic communication schools, high schools that have graphic communications or printing programs in them that could really use that paper.
Oh, well said. Excellent. Yes.
Yeah. So another question is one item that every shop should throw away today.
I wouldn't say throw away, but I'd say quit counting it. You see, you've got these partial containers of ink
Hmm.
that are sitting there, and how old are they?
Right.
And most of those partial containers of ink that are all kinds of different colors can be combined into a black. They're taking space. They're getting old. Use them and move on.
Right. Yep. Yep. Another question is coffee cups in the press room. Yes or no?
uh, I would say there would be coffee cups and cell phones. Uh, they are dangerous items. They will eventually be turned over, and if the rules are said and explained in the interest of customers' work and protecting the work, um, nobody wants to say, "Boss, I owe you $400 for that pallet that I spilled my cup all over, and we've now got to reproduce it." That's a sad moment.
That's a sad day.
Yes.
Um, 5 minute cleanup or end of shift cleanup?
Um, it needs to be cleaned up to the point that the next shift coming in is is not in any way. In fact, the question should be asked of the people coming in, and that's just a respectful question. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else I need to do before I leave?
Hmm.
That person coming in and taking over that shift gives an honest answer, and that is a respected answer. If it's the end of the shift, it needs to be almost perfectly straight and clean and orderly for the next morning, for when you come in, or when the next, if you happen to be finishing up the second shift, for when first shift comes in tomorrow morning. And
Absolutely.
and on that point, there needs to be a journal that is kept at particular, both for the plant and for the press room, in terms of what occurred, how much production occurred, were there any difficulties, and what you need to be observant of regarding both the job that is in process or the job that's coming up next. If you know anything about it, um, keeping a journal for the next person to read makes a big difference in them feeling comfortable in taking over after somebody else.
That's great. I have another question, and it was a good one, but now I have lost it. Uh, let let me see if I can try to remember it. Um, what makes printing company move beyond average and become stellar?
My opinion is the cooperation and teamwork between um, salespeople and production. When there is mutual respect of a deep and committed nature between those two departments, it is priceless. And it shows up in the end product, in how customers are treated, and how people do the extra mile for each other.
Yes, absolutely. So this has been I know we could go on for a long time, but we can't. um this has been very eye-opening. I think that people who own printing companies and manage printing companies and are supervisors and even work in printing companies, this is insightful because a clean workplace, really no matter where you work, helps with production, operations, morale, employee morale, customer and confidence, and it can boost sales.
On that, may I comment?
Absolutely.
I'm a big believer in handwritten personal notes to customers, but it was also my experience and observation that production people, particularly those who go the extra mile, and that's happening almost every day somewhere in the plant, sometimes in multiple departments. A handwritten note from a sales or customer service person or from a production person to a salesperson. And I'll give you examples of it. A handwritten note given to someone in a sealed envelope may be the first handwritten note of appreciation and thanks that individual's ever received. I promise you, it will be kept. It will be kept by the individual receiving it, and it is better than money. You have just said something that that person will carry with them and think of you forever. When production people are appreciated in that manner, it carries through for a long time. When production people write such a note to a salesperson, for instance, the production team is having to work Saturday and maybe even part of Sunday in order to meet deliveries that they've run behind on that are expected on Monday and are very important to the customer. That salesperson is there getting pizzas for lunch, running any kind of errands that need to be. They're not out playing golf. They're not at home watching television. They're right there where their work's being produced. Production people appreciate that. They recognize it. You don't have to say anything. It just means a lot to them.
That's right. And it solidifies that the company's a team.
Yes, it does.
Well, Sid, thank you so much for being on Pica Talk today. This has been eye-opening and insightful. This is a wrap for this episode of Pica Talk. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell and follow us along on either YouTube or Spotify or wherever that you listen to your podcasts at. This is Terry McKee, Director of Member Engagement with Pica, and thank you for listening to Pica Talk.